Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm Madeline.
And I'm Andrea.
And this is episode 151. For new viewers, Fruity Knitting is a 90-minute program that brings you knitting inspiration from around the world, as well as some extra snippets of travel, history, and storytelling that we hope adds joy to your life and brings a smile to your face.
And in this episode, we're taking you to northern Germany, to the beautiful city of Hamburg. So Madeline and I drove up to Hamburg last summer to interview Judit Gummlich, who's the author of this very excellent book, Embroidery on Knits. So Hamburg is a really beautiful city with plenty to explore. So we also took the opportunity to create a travel vlog and give you a tour of the city. So that's included in today's program. And coming back to our feature interview with Judit Gummlich, so Judit's book, Embroidery on Knits, provides inspiration and step-by-step instruction for enhancing your knitted garments with embroidery. And as soon as I saw this book, it really stood out to me as being the most comprehensive guide on this subject, because there's a lot of books on embroidery, but I don't think anything to this level and standard for embroidering hand-knitted garments or knitted fabrics. It's really filled with immaculate and detailed handwork, really great practical advice, and stunning photography. So we filmed this interview in July last year, and when I recently gathered all the footage together again to edit it, I just became really excited and inspired all over again, because Judit is a true artist. Her work is really amazing. She's also a really lovely person. And I know I go on a lot and get very excited about all of our interviews, but I do think this one is a special interview. And if you're somebody who appreciates seeing beauty in small and intimate things, I think this interview is really going to appeal to you.
Yeah.
So our program also includes updates on our own knitting projects, including the design that's finished that I'm wearing. Plus, we have our pop psychology segment again with Madeline, who is going to conduct a deep dive into the psychology behind the boyfriend sweater curse.
Yeah, the boyfriend sweater curse, or the curse of the love sweater.
Yeah, so this is really a fun segment. I think we should definitely start with you. But before you go into the psychology of the curse, just give us an update on the details.
Yeah, I'll give you an update on the actual sweater first. So last episode, I talked about the sweater that I've been making for my boyfriend, Ryan. And many of you were seriously concerned about the wide circumference of the stitches that I had knit on, cast on and knit the few rows of. And I just wanted to reassure you, the circumference is correct. Although the sweater is knitted bottom up, I decided to do a provisional cast on and knit the yoke first. So that's why it was a bit wider than some of you might have expected. And I tried it on Ryan, it fits him very well. So there's no worries there. As a short recap for new viewers, this is the Varde Rundfelt men's sweater by Rauma Designs, and I'm using the Rauma Phenol yarn, which is a rustic sport weight yarn made from 100% wool. This is a size medium that I've been knitting, and I've really enjoyed how quickly it knits up compared to some of my other recent projects. So as you can see, I've already done the yoke. I just need to do the ribbing around the neckline now. And I also find the pattern instructions refreshingly short, because these days I find that many knitting patterns can be over 20 pages long, which is pretty long in my eyes. And this one, in contrast, only has half a page of written out instructions and 2 pages of colorwork charts. So I love that. However, it is missing a schematic. That would have been good to have.
But you know what? I get that a short pattern description is easy to read, right? And that feels refreshing. But if you don't have a detailed schematic, it is so hard to do really good modifications. And actually adding a detailed schematic doesn't take up that much more room, and you can have a lot of information in there. If you've got all of the exact measurements for every section of the garment, then you can see in advance exactly how that garment is meant to look on you, and then in advance you can do all of the calculations to change it for yourself. Otherwise, you've got to just kind of knit the thing and then try it on and figure out where it doesn't fit you, undo those bits and redo it, and that's pretty tedious.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. Although so far I've been pretty lucky. Another reason I don't quite fully 100% like this pattern is that it's missing out on a recommended row gauge. It gives you a stitch gauge but not a row gauge. And to me, that's a reason to start with a provisional cast on and then knit the yoke first, so that after you pick up on the provisional cast on, you still have the option to add some extra rows of length before dividing for the arms and the body.
If your row gauge isn't long enough.
Yeah, if your row gauge isn't long enough.
Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, you can always do that if you have the knowledge beforehand. And when you go to the Ravelry projects, you'll notice that lots of people actually included some short row shaping around the neckline, which is not written in the pattern description. And those who didn't ended up having a slightly wide or slightly sloppy looking neckline. So here's a picture of Ryan wearing his yoke. And at this stage, the pattern told me to knit the ribbing for the neckline and then cast off. But as you can see, there's way too much skin showing on the sides of the shoulders and also at the back. Admittedly, I did pull down the yoke a little bit too much on this photo, so it should have sat a bit higher, but the problem of the wide neckline remained even after correcting this. In contrast, the front section already sits quite high, and you wouldn't want to add any further rows before knitting the ribbed neckline. So I clearly needed to add some short row shaping to fill in the gaps. So in case you're new to short row shaping is a really great method to add some length to a specific section in your fabric by working only part of the row before turning your work around and knitting back into the opposite direction again. And you do this back and forth, gradually picking up more stitches from that original row to create that extra length in the specific area of your fabric. So I'm now going to tell you the calculations that I made for this specific neckline shaping with the short rows. And as a quick disclaimer, I did go to Mum for help, but she only had limited time to give me, so she explained the basics to me, and then I went and figured out the rest by myself. So if there's any mistakes in this, or it's not the 100%...
It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not Mum's fault if this isn't 100% correct. But I think it is, because it worked out really well for me.
I think you did a good job.
Thank you. So here you can see the sections on the shoulders where I need to add extra fabric. So it's mainly on the back and on the sides of the neck. First, I measured how much extra fabric I wanted at the back of the neck before starting the neckband. I needed to add around 4 centimeters in length, which equaled 16 rows. Then I divided 16 by 2, which equaled 8 short row sets, because each short row includes knitting back again in the opposite direction. Next, I measured the width of the front neck, where I wouldn't be adding any extra material. I decided that the middle 12 centimeters, or 20 stitches, wouldn't have any extra material added to it. And I also measured how wide I wanted my first short row at the back to be, and decided on 30 centimeters, which is 48 stitches. And here's how you can add short rows to shape a neckline. You start at the center back of the neckline and knit a specific number of stitches to the left. In my case, it was 48 stitches divided by 2, which is 24 stitches. Then you turn your knitting, work back to the center and knit 24 stitches in the opposite direction. At this point, you turn and knit to the left again. After passing the center back, you knit those 24 stitches plus some extra stitches before turning once more. And you continue back and forth like this, gradually adding more stitches to your short rows on each side until you've reached the edge of the center front. This gradual process of adding stitches to your short rows mimics the natural slope of your shoulders. So this is what my final short rows looked like, with one arrow representing a single short row. Now here's how I calculated the segments. Since you do the same thing on both sides of the neckline, it's enough to do the calculations for one half of the neckline. The total number of stitches on my neckline was 138. Divide that in half for each side and you get 69 stitches. I know that my first short row will be 15 centimeters or 24 stitches from the center back to the left, and I won't add any extra short rows to the center front, which is 6 centimeters or 10 stitches wide. So I calculate 69 minus 24 minus 10 stitches, and that leaves me with 35 stitches to distribute among the remaining short rows. You can see how I've distributed them, gradually decreasing the number of stitches that I include in the next short row. Now, creating these short rows by myself was a lot of fun and actually less difficult than I expected. I'm really happy with how the neckline sits now. But what's most important is that Ryan is happy with how this sweater looks. And that brings me on to another subject. A frequent comment beneath our last episode was to beware the boyfriend sweater curse. Now, if you're new to the knitting community and don't know what that is, the boyfriend sweater curse is a belief that hand knitting a sweater for your romantic partner before you're married will inevitably lead to the two of you breaking up. Now, naturally, I was already aware of this curse, but nevertheless, I decided to go ahead and knit Ryan a sweater. So this sweater curse is quite a juicy debate in the knitting community, and I ended up going onto an internet deep dive. So we're going to discuss the curse today in pop psychology. Is there truth and wisdom behind the sweater curse, or is it simply a stupid superstition? Now, I personally don't believe in curses in the supernatural or mystical sense, but I do believe in analysing it from a psychological perspective. Let's first of all assume that the curse is not real. In that case, why is it still such a big phenomena in the knitting community that some people really do take seriously? Now, when I thought about this, two psychological effects came to my mind. The first one is called confirmation bias, and the second one is called illusory correlation effect. Breakup stories usually evoke stronger emotions and are more likely to spread through gossip. As negative as the sweater curse is, our brains do like to hold on to it, and therefore confirmation bias leads us to focus on those stories that support the idea of the sweater curse, while overlooking the countless examples in which the curse did not take effect. The illusory correlation effect is when two uncommon events, such as knitting a sweater for a partner and breaking up, occur in close proximity, which makes them stand out in our memory. And this makes it easy to assume a connection, even when none exists. Hand knitting a sweater for another person does require the knitter to invest a significant amount of time, money, and effort. So it is a demonstration of your love and dedication towards the recipient. And therefore breaking up after such a big gift might feel extra painful and stick out in the knitter's memory even more. And what I'm trying to say with this is that many knitters break up with their partners, whether they've knit them a sweater or not. But perhaps those who did go to that extra trouble might feel extra resentful and disappointed in the failed relationship. Yeah, so those are kind of explanations for why the boyfriend sweater curse is such a big phenomenon, even if it isn't true. But personally, I actually think there's a little bit more to it than that, and perhaps even some truth to the curse. And as it turns out, so do many knitters on Reddit, which is an online platform that I highly recommend. I went to Reddit and I searched for boyfriend sweater curse, and here are some of the theories and opinions that knitters shared there. So interestingly, most people agreed that if a couple breaks up, while or after a sweater has been knit, then the relationship was doomed to begin with. And the sweater curse simply sped up the process of breaking up. Now, if you think about it more closely, knitting a sweater, which takes so much, quite a high investment of energy, is basically telling your partner, hey, I actually see a future with you. It's quite an intimate gesture, and it can even feel a bit binding for the recipient. So, and also, I thought about this, and there's this song that goes, "That boy is mine." And that's what I think when you put a sweater onto your partner, it's like telling the world without saying it, that man's my man because he's wearing my sweater. The conclusion of that is, what if your partner doesn't reciprocate that same level of commitment? Then the sweater might actually have a negative effect on the relationship, because it could freak him out or her out and make them rethink or reevaluate what they want from the relationship. And then also, if your partner shows a lack of enthusiasm or appreciation, you as the knitter will definitely be disappointed, and it'll probably result in some arguments that might bring forth some uncomfortable truths.
And speed up the process of breaking up.
Yeah. Now, here's another reason why the sweater curse is a phenomenon, even if it might not be true. Some people brought up the time factor. And as we've demonstrated on the podcast, it can take months, sometimes even a year, to finish a sweater. And a lot can happen to a relationship during that time, especially if the relationship is new when you start knitting. So maybe by the time the sweater is completed, the relationship just naturally fizzled out. As a solution to this, one Reddit user suggested not planning further into the future than the relationship has lasted. For example, if it takes you 6 months to knit a sweater, wait until you've been together at least 6 months. If you're faster, you might be able to start after just 3 months. And if you're slower, maybe you should wait a year. Personally, I'm pretty sure I've waited long enough because it'll be our 1-year anniversary this January, and I hope to finish the sweater within the next 3 months, even with our busy schedule at the moment, including the Costa Rica knitting retreats in February. Now, the sweater curse could also be a reflection of bad communication. What if your partner simply doesn't like hand-knit sweaters? Maybe they find them itchy or unfashionable or slightly embarrassing. So the solution to this is really good communication. Because as much as we want our partners to love the hand-knitted items that we make them, we also have to accept if their fashion tastes differ from our own. The best way to do this, I think, is by involving them in the decision-making process. So let them help to choose the design, the materials, and the colors, because this will drastically increase the likelihood of them enjoying and appreciating the end result, which is really what we want.
Yeah. And wearing it.
Yes, absolutely, because of all the effort that we put in. Anyway, I really recommend checking out this topic on Reddit, because apart from advice, people also share their own personal stories and experiences with the sweater curse, which are quite fun to read. For example, one woman wrote that she used to knit her ex-husband lots of sweaters while they were still married, and she didn't blame the sweater curse for their divorce, but she did say that he continues to wear those same sweaters in his new relationship in front of his new wife, who does not like that. So in this case, the curse affects the new wife and not the knitter. And I thought this was really funny, but I have to say I also really sympathize with the new wife.
Yes.
I would learn to knit just so that I can replace those old sweaters.
Because a jumper is like a hug from the person who knitted it.
I know, a hug from your ex-wife.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, another story was written by, I think, a younger woman who swore that she would never knit a boyfriend sweater, even for her boyfriend of 6 years. But then comes the plot twist, because her boyfriend started knitting sweaters for her, including some really cute couple sweaters that they could both wear together. So he swayed her, and now she's seriously considering knitting him a sweater after all. I also came across an excerpt of a knitting book called Stitch and Bitch Nation, published in the 2000s. And one of the patterns is a men's sweater, and there's a side note recommending a pre-nuptial agreement to avoid the boyfriend sweater curse. It suggests that before casting on the sweater, your partner should sign a document promising to appreciate all your work and praise your knitting skills, be honest if they don't like the sweater, and return the sweater if, heaven forbid, you ever break up. So I thought this twist on the prenuptial agreement was really cool.
And I actually think we should change it from the boyfriend sweater curse to the boyfriend sweater blessing, because if I look back over my life and think about all the boyfriends I've had who I didn't knit a sweater for, we broke up on every occasion. But I knitted a boyfriend sweater for Andrew and we got married.
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, it's actually also a blessing for me because I've recently become engaged. Ryan proposed to me a few months ago and we're getting married this summer. So I'm super excited.
Me too.
Yeah, and we're already starting to plan the wedding. I already have a dress. I don't plan to knit myself a dress, but we definitely want to incorporate some knitting into the final wedding outfit. So keep your eyes open.
That's going to be my job.
Yeah, keep your eyes open for a wedding-themed project.
Okay, so now it's time to show you around the beautiful city of Hamburg. Hamburg is Germany's second largest city, and it's been a major maritime trading hub since medieval times. And the harbour area is really, really gorgeous, and many of the famous sightseeing places are all within walking distance. So enjoy your time in Hamburg, and we'll see you afterwards.
In dieser Stadt kenn ich mich aus. In dieser Stadt war ich mal zu Haus. Wie sieht die Stadt wohl heute aus? In dieser Stadt war ich mal zu Haus.
Mum and I have travelled up to Hamburg to interview a special author and designer, so we thought we'd take you on a little tour around Hamburg while we're here. Hamburg is Germany's second largest city, and it's been a major maritime trading hub since medieval times due to the Elbe River connecting it to the North Sea, so it's really accessible. It's a really beautiful city with so much to see, including some really great harbour views, but we are going to start our tour underground. So this is the entrance to the old Elbe Tunnel, connecting the city centre to Steinwerder, Hamburg's port and industrial area. And its official name is St. Pauli Elbtunnel. Back in the early 1900s, crossing the river was a real hassle because the ferries were overloaded with workers commuting to the harbour and the shipyards, and they simply couldn't keep up with the high demand. And so this meant that not only did workers often arrive late, but the ferries were also blocking the river traffic, making it difficult for the cargo ships to pass through. So the city initially considered a large bridge to solve the congestion problem, but it was way too costly. So instead, they dug a tunnel underneath the river, opening the St. Pauli Elbtunnel in 1911. The tunnel is 24 metres underground, so large elevators were built to carry the people and vehicles down there. It took 4,400 workers 4 years to complete, but it was worth it because up to 19 million people used the tunnel annually. It was a real technical marvel at the time that allowed pedestrians, cyclists, and even cars to pass beneath the Elbe, speeding up commutes and reducing the river traffic. So this tunnel is 200 metres long, and today it's mainly used by pedestrians and bike riders. It's also a protected monument, and recent renovations cost 131 million euros, which shows how important this tunnel is to the city of Hamburg. To be fair, it is a very special tunnel because it's the only tunnel of its kind in the world that's still being actively used. So we're in Speicherstadt, Hamburg's warehouse city, which despite its name is really beautiful. It's a complex of red brick buildings standing on oak log foundations, and it once served as the warehouse district at Hamburg's port. So back in the late 19th century, Hamburg joined the German Empire, and it was still allowed to keep its own tax and customs regulations. However, eventually Hamburg's trade-free zone was restricted to the port area along the Elbe River. So in response to this, the city built Speicherstadt to increase its storage capacity within that limited trade-free zone. At the time Speicherstadt was built, there was a renewed interest in Gothic architecture, which you can really tell by the pointed arch windows and pointed rooftops. They're very typical neo-Gothic features. I love how aspects of Gothic architecture are mixed up with more modern features like red brick walls. Speicherstadt is a really great place to come and walk around in, and there are many other popular attractions in close proximity, including the Elbphilharmonie. So this is Hamburg's famous concert hall, the Elbphilharmonie, which was built just 7 years ago in 2017. It was supposed to cost 241 million euros, and it ended up at a whopping 866 million euros. The architecture is very beautiful, and the acoustics are supposed to be excellent. The building has 2 layers. The bottom half, made of bricks, was once a warehouse, and on top is a modern glass structure with a wavy rooftop resembling ship sails. I really love the glass exterior because its colour changes with the weather, so on a sunny day it turns a really deep blue, which really fits the nautical theme. Besides 3 concert halls, the building also houses a hotel, very expensive apartments, and a public viewing plaza where you can watch the city's hustle and bustle from above. And despite being new, the Elbphilharmonie has become one of Hamburg's most beloved landmarks. So back when I was at uni, I shared a house with 10 other students, and we were a little bit of a nerdy group. So we'd often spend our evenings together around the table, each of us engrossed in our own little hobby. One of my roommates was really into painting these miniature fantasy board game figures, and he also made dioramas, and he was so good at it that he even sold some on eBay. I was always very impressed by the detail he could put into each individual piece. Anyway, today we're going 100 levels up from that because we're at the Miniaturwunderland, Miniature Wonderland. It's an exhibition of detailed miniature landscapes spanning multiple rooms and multiple levels within this building. And I know it sounds a little bit like something for kids, but it's actually impressively intricate with hours and hours of work invested into each individual piece. And with the help of thousands of LED lights, a clever computer system and a vast network of cables, this world literally comes to life, simulating all hours of the day within a regular 15-minute cycle. You even get to see some of Hamburg's famous landmarks, including the old Elbtunnel, which we just came from, and also the Elbphilharmonie. So I'm really excited to take a look around. The Miniature Wonderland features detailed miniature landscapes of regions like Germany, Switzerland, the US, and Scandinavia, all connected by a vast network of model trains. These landscapes simulate life on Earth with impressive detail, from tidal movements at the Scandinavian coastline to randomized car traffic in cities. Each car, costing around 800 to 1,000 euros, has a built-in magnet that follows a wire embedded in the streets, making them appear driven by miniature people. They even follow real traffic regulations, with a computer system making randomized decisions about their routes. So in front of the St. Michaelis Church, known to the locals simply as Der Michel, as it was named after the Archangel Michael. After it was completed in 1601, it actually had quite a rough path ahead of it because it was destroyed and rebuilt 3 times. So it's a true story of resilience. Mum and I are going to climb to the top of the church tower to enjoy the view. In 1750, it was first hit by lightning and it burnt down to its foundation, but was rebuilt again in the Baroque style that you see today. In 1906, the church caught fire again while a worker was soldering, and it burnt down to the ground a second time. But the very next day, the church community decided to rebuild the church, but this time replacing the wooden structures in the tower with steel and concrete. So all was well for a while until this church was bombed in World War II. The community of Hamburg donated money to help rebuild the church a third time. It was decided then to replicate the Baroque version from the 1750s. And today it is Hamburg's largest church, as it can seat 2,500 people. It's still used for sermons and concerts and funerals. In 2015, it even held the funeral of Germany's famous former Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, who came from Hamburg originally. So I've just climbed up to the top of the tower, which stands 132 meters tall, and just like I can see the whole of Hamburg from up here, most of Hamburg can see this top of the tower. And in fact, it used to be used by sailors as a reference point to navigate the Elbe River, which you see behind me. So over there is the entrance to the Elbe Tunnel, which we passed through earlier today. And if I turn the camera, you can see the Elbphilharmonie and Speicherstadt. So I hope you've enjoyed this little tour around Hamburg. Mum and I had a lot of fun, and I think now we're going to head off and have some fresh fish for dinner.
In dieser Stadt kenn ich mich aus. In dieser Stadt war ich mal zu Haus. Wie sieht die Stadt wohl heute aus? In dieser Stadt war ich mal zu Haus. In dieser Stadt kenn ich mich aus. In dieser Stadt war ich mal zu Haus. Wie sieht die Stadt wohl heute aus?
Welcome back. So last month we celebrated our 150th anniversary or 150th episode on the Fruity Knitting YouTube channel. And looking back, it is fun to see how much we've grown since the early days, not just in our camera presence, but also in the way we edit and present our content to people. Yeah. So if you watch the early episodes, you'll notice a lot of ums and ahs coming from Mum and Dad. So Dad used to do this podcast with Mum, not me. And along with some awkward editing. But you guys did improve a lot over time. And then yesterday I watched some of my earlier performances or appearances, and I have to say I'm so relieved that I've improved since then. So I do think that by now the program feels pretty smooth and effortless. But the reason behind this is actually that we do a lot of preparation in advance, because we always try to fit as much interesting content into the shortest amount of time possible so that the quality of the show remains high. So if you want to show your appreciation and support us in our work, the best way to do this is by making a small monthly donation as a Fruity Knitting patron, because your contribution really helps to cover essential costs that we have to cover ourselves every single month as we produce this channel and these episodes, which include technology, subscriptions, equipment, travel expenses, occasional ones, and then the many, many hours that we invest into creating this content. So we would really appreciate your support. It's very quick and easy. We have a Patreon link in the description box below. And every single patron does make a difference.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your support.
Yes, thank you very much. It's actually very necessary because of the work that we do. That's the only way we could do this work is by having enough patrons.
Yeah.
Because we really are working 6 days a week. But thank you so much to our patrons who have been supporting the show for as long as you have. We totally appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And now it's time for Bring and Brag, so I can tell you about this finished design, which I'm wearing. And I think this has to be a first for me to have actually finished knitting a design before I even start to talk about it on the show. But it was an incredibly quick design to knit up. So I'll start by showing you a picture of the original. It's the Fern sweater by Pernilla Larsson, who's the designer behind Knitting for Olive, and it's designed with the Knitting for Olive merino and the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair held together, and it knits up to be about a DK weight gauge. It's a really wintry design because of the classic turtleneck and the folded over collar, but because of the vertical eyelet lace pattern and the blousey sleeves with a long slim cuff, I think it also looks really elegant. We interviewed Knitting for Olive in the summer of 2023 in their shop in Copenhagen, and their store just has a beautiful array of heavenly colours all around on the shelves, and they also have samples of their designs for customers to try on. And I tried on the Fern sweater, not Fern, and I love the way it looked on me. It's one of those designs that I think unexpectedly flatter you when you've got it on, and I really don't think I would have chosen to knit this design if I hadn't first tried it on. And I actually brought back some Knitting for Olive yarn with me, especially to knit up the Fern sweater. This is the colourway that I chose. It's the Knitting for Olive Merino in dark mustard and the soft silk mohair in the same colourway. And I actually started knitting the design in these colours. So the design's knitted top down. You start with the turtleneck, which is really good because once you've knitted the turtleneck, you can actually try it on and see what the colour looks like right up against your face.
Yeah.
But when I did that, it somehow felt kind of underwhelming to me. It made me, even though I love this colour and I do actually think it suits me, it somehow just made me feel like it was heavy and drab. I suspect I also had the midwinter blues because I really lost all my inspiration to keep knitting on it. And then I remembered that I'd brought back some Fleece and Harmony yarn from our recent trip to Prince Edward Island that I could actually use as a substitute, and that's this yarn here. And I just feel like this colour is so much more happy and uplifting because it reminds me also of a beautiful blue summer sky. So it could be, if you've lost your knitting mojo, it could actually be because you're uninspired to knit in the colour that you've chosen.
Yeah, but I have to say, I do generally find that you look better in the strong, bright colours these days than this year.
Yeah.
I don't think this suits you as well.
Maybe it's when you get older, you need lighter, brighter colours. Who knows?
I don't know.
So I showed this yarn in our coverage of the Prince Edward Island Fibre Festival back in episode 148. It's the Wild Winds yarn in the colourway Trondheim Blue, and I also bought some Rowan Kid Silk Haze in a pale blue to pair with it. So Wild Winds is a 2-ply semi-worsted fingering weight yarn that's made from the fleece of a special flock of sheep on Prince Edward Island in Canada. So the sheep are a crossbreed between North Country Cheviot, Rideau Arcot and Coopworth, and they're living on a farm called Wild Winds Pastures, which is not far from the Fleece and Harmony spinning mill. So it's a very locally produced and traceable yarn. So I'm a fan of Fleece and Harmony yarn. I am constantly wearing my vibrant orange Carbeth, and Madeline lives in her good grandpa cardigan. Yeah. Both of them are knitted in the Fleece and Harmony Aran Weight, signature Aran Weight yarn. I really appreciate that their yarn doesn't peel. So I've been wearing this for years and there's no pilling on it whatsoever, which is a big, big bonus for me. So for this project, I have paired the Wild Winds 2-ply in the colourway Trondheim Blue with a soft pale blue from the Rowan Kid Silk Haze, and together I think they make a really beautiful flecked effect. I don't know if the camera is picking it up from this distance, but I'm really enjoying taking 2 shades of the same colour and creating a third colour or a different texture. That's a lot of fun. And I was able to match the recommended gauge with this substitute yarn, which is super. So, as I said, the pattern is knitted top down, and the pattern says to start with a long tail cast on, but I actually used a tubular cast on just to give it a nice stretchy rounded edge. Yeah. And then you get on and you knit the 1x1 ribbing in the turtleneck, and at the base of the turtleneck, you actually add some short row shaping. I think it's been undone here, but it sort of ends up being a little bit like this shape before you start on the eyelet lace pattern. So to be honest, I didn't swatch for this project before I started knitting it, and that's because the pattern uses the same stitch count on the turtleneck and the upper part of the yoke for the first 4 sizes. So I didn't even need to pick a size until I'd knitted the turtleneck and the first part of the yoke. So that's what I planned to do, just knit the turtleneck, and when I'd knitted down for about 10 centimetres into the eyelet pattern, I would use that as my swatch and then pick a size and change my needle size if I needed to. So it does actually make sense for the pattern to use the same stitch count for the first 4 sizes because body types really don't change or differ much in this area of the body. It's only once you get to the width of the shoulders, the depth of the underarm, the width of the chest area, and what goes on down here in the belly section that bodies really differ a lot. So it was super handy not having to knit a swatch.
Yeah, if only all patterns were designed that way.
But actually, you could say that this was my swatch, because when I tried this on, it did feel a little bit snug around my neck, and I'm not a fan of feeling constricted around the neck. So the second time round, instead of using the recommended needle size of 3.5 millimeters, I went up to 3.75 millimeters. And then on the eyelet yoke pattern here on the yoke, I used a 4 millimeter needle, and then I switched up again when I separated the sleeves from the body to a 4.5 millimeter needle just for the chest area to give myself a little bit of extra room. And then after that, as I worked my way down to the waist, I switched back down to 4 millimeter just to give it a more of a tapered effect towards the waist. But apart from that, I didn't do any other modifications on this design. And I can say it was a really enjoyable knit. The pattern was easy to follow. It was incredibly fast and just really pleasant. And I can also say that the lace pattern is totally beginner friendly. There's only 3 rows in the lace pattern. You work 1 row of very, very easy lace followed by 2 rows of stocking stitch. So it's a definite television knit.
Yeah, Mum was making the sweater sound so attractive that I've started knitting one as well.
And I just want to point out this little detail. Here's a picture of the underarm. I really love the way the eyelet pattern lines up on the body and the sleeves, and there's no gaps at the underarm, and there's also no seaming. I think it's all done very neat and elegantly. So I can thoroughly recommend knitting this pattern, and as Madeline just said, she was so impressed with how quickly it knitted up, so she's starting knitting one too. So if you're also inspired to knit this and you'd like to try the yarn combination that I've used, Kim from Fleece and Harmony is offering Fruity Knitting patrons a 10% discount on the Wild Winds 2-ply and the Rowan Kid Silk Haze, and she's put together some colour combinations for you to choose from. So the details of this discount can be found on our Patron page and also in our program notes on our website, fruityknitting.com. So thank you very much to Fleece and Harmony. So coming up now is our interview with Judit Gummlich. I think you're really going to enjoy it. We filmed this interview in a lovely little yarn store in the centre of Hamburg. So we're surrounded by beautiful coloured yarns and lots of natural sunlight. So it adds to the atmosphere. This yarn store is called Milas, and the owner is a lovely lady called Naima. And I can highly recommend this yarn store if you're travelling through Hamburg, because she has a very interesting selection of yarns and books.
Yeah, definitely. So that's all from us for now. It's time to say goodbye, and you'll see our next episode in Costa Rica. Thank you for spending time with us.
Bye.
Bye.
So welcome to Fruity Knitting. Madeline and I have driven up to Hamburg to interview Judit Gummlich, who is the author of this fairly recently published book, Embroidery on Knits. And this book offers inspiration on how to enhance your knitted garments with embroidery, and it's filled with immaculate and detailed handwork, great practical advice and really stunning photography. It immediately stood out to me as being the most comprehensive guide on this subject. So I was thrilled when Judit agreed to having an interview. So thank you for coming on Fruity Knitting.
Thanks for having me. It's a great honour to be here.
Great. So you grew up in a family where the women were highly accomplished crafters and makers, and for 20 years you've been working in the costume department of a theatre here in Hamburg. So tell us a little bit more about your background and then say what's inspiring your designs now and show us some of these examples.
Yeah. As you said, there were a lot of crafters in my family, especially women, and one was very important for my career or what I have become today, and that was my maternal grandmother. She was a very skilled woman because she was a home economics teacher, so very good at craft things and all things house. How do you say?
Homemaking.
Homemaking, yeah. And I think I have inherited some really good qualities from her. She was very pragmatic, so her attitude was just do it because she had to. I think in this generation, but and she was also quite fearless. So if there was something to do, she just did it. I joined her.
And this is something she made, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. She made that little bunny for my mum's birthday. I think it must have been in the late 40s, and you can see she used fabric scraps, and I think this fabric is like from an old mattress maybe. That one might be from a sofa. Yeah, it's stuffed with straw. With straw,
Yeah, okay, that's great that you still got it.
Yeah, so she had to be very creative with materials, and that's what I've learned from her too.
Okay, and she made things for you when you were a child, didn't she?
Yes, yeah. She knitted jumpers, she sewed clothes, and she mended a lot. Yeah.
Making little embroidery
on top, yes, and she added. Often she added a little personal note on what she made. So she mended an area or moth hole, and then she would embroider some little flowers on it. And I loved that as a child. I was so proud, and those embroideries were like little messages of love. Yeah, that's how I felt as a child.
That's gorgeous. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your training.
After school, I made an apprenticeship as a seamstress at the theatre. And afterwards, I studied literature and theatre science. And to finance my studies, I worked in several costume and haute couture studios. So that is where I gained my sartorial skills.
Okay, a lot. And in your 20s, you told me you had another passion. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was active in the rockabilly scene, so I made my hair 40s style. I collected original, authentic garments and clothing from that time. That was a lot of work, actually, and doing research, and also in my size. Yeah. And
so you were completely dressed in the 40s?
Yes.
Every day?
Almost every day.
Almost every day, including your underwear?
Yes.
And shoes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite a dedication. So is that how you came across this kind of work, or?
Yeah, because I started to collect vintage clothes, and I especially loved those beaded cardigans from the 50s, and because I had to buy everything that fitted me, so some of them were not in good condition, and so I had to repair them. So I did a lot of repairs at that time, and you can see here it's fragile embroidery, so I started to mend it, and while I did that, I was thinking I could do that myself, doing a lot of reproduction garments at that time. I had the idea I could try that myself. Maybe not the same, a bit scaled up, but that was how the idea of this cardigan came up.
And was this your first big project?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get the hair out so everyone can see the beautiful... Okay, so what was your idea with this? It's very much floral inspired by your garden.
Yeah, I think I'm a very... I love opulence, so I had the idea of a garden on a cardigan. Yeah, and I tried to find one, to buy one, but of course I didn't find one, so I had to make it myself.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's really gorgeous, and you've got a bee or a bug or something here.
Yeah.
That's
Flea, I don't know, yeah.
okay. What else have we got on the table? More examples of your work? Or is this how you get some inspiration here?
Yeah, that is, I would say, where I get my main inspiration from. I would start with my garden and nature, because I think you find the most perfect patterns and color combinations and lines and silhouettes in nature. That is, I would say, my main resource. You can see it here, for example. This is a flower from my garden. I just picked this morning.
Echinacea flower.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the embroidery I made. So that is the inspiration and the actual embroidery.
I actually think your embroidery looks more beautiful than the flower.
Really? No.
You've improved nature.
Yeah, and I have a very eco-friendly garden, so there's a lot of insect life there too. And as you see, I love to embroider insects too. I think
That's
it's
great.
It's a
really
whole
great.
cosmos for itself, the insect world.
Yeah, okay. That's really wonderful. And then, so this is artwork that you're taking colours from, is that right?
Yes, I try to learn from artists and paintings. And so, what I often do is try to split up the colors I find in a painting and make those little color cards as an inspiration for further embroideries. And as I said, I'm a collector. So I collect vintage textiles, a lot of vintage embroidery, for example. Those I found in Denmark.
Okay.
And
yeah, lovely. And they give you ideas of shapes and patterns. And
yes, and how colors can be combined, and that I wouldn't have come up with that color combination myself, but I think it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so as I said, you recently published this really, really gorgeous book that I found had excellent advice in it and just really stunning romantic photography. So what was your goal with this book, and can we also have an overview of the chapters?
Yes, sure. So I taught a lot of workshops about embroidery and knit during the last years, and people would always ask me, which books do you recommend? And I found out there wasn't any referential books on the market, so I thought I could write one.
Yeah.
And so I did.
Okay, good.
And I wanted to bottle up my experience, now almost 15 years, and break it down to small steps to guide the crafter, the reader, through the process. And also to prevent them doing the same mistakes I did. And just encourage them to go on their own journey of stitching adventure.
So it's aimed at all handcrafters, so not just knitters but also crocheters, because you can do embroidery on knitting or crochet.
Yes, also store-bought knitwear or vintage knitwear, whatever you would like to.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look through it.
Yeah, so it starts with a short overview over the materials and tools you need to start. And then there comes a very detailed step-by-step instruction how to set up your hoop. And then a little chapter about techniques, how to end and a thread, for example. And then we have a stitch directory with the basic stitches.
Oh, gorgeous. Yeah.
And then there is a special chapter about silk ribbon embroidery.
Yeah, that inspires me the most, I think.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. Then for those who want to dive deeper and love planning, there is a chapter about color and placement, color theory. And then we have the project pages with 18 projects, from small to big, simple to advanced. And in the end, there is a chapter about embroidering mittens. These are perfect as a gift and quickly made, and you don't need a hoop for those. So
that's great to start off with, maybe.
It is, yes.
And you can make really personal gifts.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's a different technique. You count the stitches, and here again you have the step-by-step tutorials. And in the end, there is a poster with all the
animals
templates,
and flowers and things on it. Oh,
Yeah.
that's gorgeous.
And you can also find all those templates on Line's website, on the product page of the book, if you want to resize them or trace them directly from the screen.
Oh, they're so gorgeous. I'll just open it up a little bit for you to see. Okay, that's amazing. And the photography is really, really gorgeous. So say something very quick about the working with the photographer.
Yeah, that was one of the luckiest things that Simone Havlisch agreed to make the photos, because she understood without many words what I was about. She catched the atmosphere I was thinking of, and she made the pictures to my ideas.
And this particular cover picture is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's actually my favorite, because I think it's like a Victorian curiosity cabinet, and
Yes.
it's my world in a frame. It's my little cosmos I live in.
Exactly. It's opulent and busy too. I think we share that aesthetic. I
Yes.
like things very, very ornate.
Yes, me too.
Okay, that's gorgeous. Now, sometimes embroidery is sometimes considered to be sort of like a slow and meticulous craft that needs a lot of diligence, and this can be intimidating for beginners. So how can we dispel this image and encourage newcomers to give it a try? I'm hoping that you can share some practical tips on getting it started, how to get started, just so that if any of our viewers have hesitations, that we can overcome them.
So the good news is it's way easier than traditional embroidery, and you wouldn't think that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because in classic embroidery you have to be very accurate. Your stitches are very small, and that is why it takes so long time. But my approach is a bit different. You see, for example, in this swatch, every petal is one stitch. They're way bigger. They're maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 times bigger than a cross stitch, for example. So this kind of beginner-friendly template, that is what I always show in my workshops, and even people with no experience in stitching, they can make that in 3 hours. So that is achievable.
That's great. So you can definitely snazzy up your hat in one evening.
Yeah. And also, I would say that because you have a knitted fabric as your foundation, it's much more forgiving than a woven linen or a classical embroidery fabric. So nobody will see it when one stitch is a bit shorter than the other in the end. So it's stress-free stitching.
Yeah, and you don't need that many new materials, do you?
Exactly, no. So you don't have to spend a lot of money for your tools. You can see what you need, of course, a garment. You need stabilizer. You can use any scrap yarn you have, from fingering to decay. You can use traditional embroidery threads or flosses, yes, like crewel wool, tapestry wool, silk threads, metallic threads, silk ribbon, and as an extra, maybe some beads or some buttons, all those buttons you keep in, those single buttons you keep in a box and never use.
And what about the needles? Are they special?
Yes. No, they're called chenille needles, and as you have to stitch through both layers here, you should use those with a sharp tip, the chenille needles.
And any particular size number?
I would say size 18, 20, 22, maybe 16, so the medium sizes are suitable for all the templates that are in the book.
And do you use a normal any hoop, or does it have to be a special hoop?
Yeah, it should be a higher hoop and a stable hoop, because it has to hold a considerable amount of knitted fabric, So if you're going to buy one, I would recommend to look out for one that is at least 1 centimeter high and has a stable metal brass screw.
Okay, and this is, you can buy at any handcrafting store.
Yes.
And the idea of that is that you draw on your picture.
Yes.
And then you you embroider over it. And is this washable, or you have to cut it away?
No, it's water soluble, so it disappears within seconds.
Okay.
And the good thing about it keeps the tension, it fixes the knitted fabric so that it doesn't stretch or warp.
Okay, and what kinds of yarns or materials, what should we know about the actual fabric of the knitting that we're embroidering on?
Well, the knitted fabric should be quite dense. Mm-hmm. And the tight gauge, because it has to hold the embroidery. Mm-hmm. It is the foundation. So I wouldn't use lace, for example, or any
open stitches
or elastic stitches. Mm-hmm. So brioche isn't that suitable, or ribbing.
Okay.
But you can use minimal texture knits like this. It's a variation of a moss stitch, I would say, or that. That looks really good when you have a voluminous embroidery on it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, or of course stocking stitch.
Yes, that's the best. Yes.
Okay, so I know that you probably encourage your beginners in workshops to use a swatch first, right? Yeah. We're not putting people off. Some people don't swatch for their knitted garments, so
that's okay.
You can still do embroidery without that.
Yes.
For instance, a good place to start is on a kid's garment, isn't it?
Yes,
like
that's
this one here.
How I started too.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, at a seam, at a children's jumper or cardigan, and you don't have to do like the whole forest. You could only choose one of those trees, for example, and place it maybe here near the neckline, just to get used to all the things, embroidery, hoop, stabilizer, and get a feeling for it.
But obviously down on the hem, it's very easy with the hoop too, isn't it?
Yes, you should look that you have access to your hoop when the knitted fabric is between the rings. You know, here it would be maybe a bit difficult, but that's a good position. And around the seams always. It looks nice and it's easy.
Just very quickly, how long would it take a beginner to do this?
I would say maybe 2 or 3 evenings.
Okay, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty quick. Okay, so once we've got started, just walk us through. What are some other tips to do?
Well, first you trace the template and then you you use it as one layer, so the stabilizer and the knitted fabric. You put it in your hoop. Yeah, then you start, of course, to stitch. Then you trim off the excess stabilizer and wash it out. Let it dry.
And then it's done?
Yes, then it's done. It's very quick and satisfying.
And what about something so complex like this on you? How would you go about doing it? Where would you start, for instance?
If you plan to stitch a big template like that, and you are knitting a garment especially for embroidery, well, I always knit top down.
Yeah.
So my first tip would be that you only knit the yoke and put those stitches on hold.
Okay, yeah,
because
that's a good idea.
Then you have easy access. You know, when you put the hoop in, you can have your hand from this side and stitch from that side. So that makes things way easier.
Okay, so don't knit the whole garment first, just knit the yoke if it's top down, or if it's bottom up and you're going to put something here, just knit a little bit, block it, do the embroidery, and then finish the garment. Yes. Okay.
Or knit it in pieces, and seam it.
Yes.
The old school way.
Okay, and where would you start in such a complex design here with the hoop? Yeah,
normally I think you would say start in the middle, but I wouldn't recommend it, because if you start here and move the hoop, you have all those stitches between your rings. That's why I tend to start at the less busy areas.
And would you start with a smaller hoop?
It depends, maybe start with the bigger hoop here, and the outsides, and then do the part with the most stitches, or maybe if you use silk ribbon, the most delicate part in the end.
Okay, so sort of work on the outsides inwards to where the most concentrated embroidery is. And washing, it's totally fine, just wash it as normal?
I turn it on the wrong side, close the buttons, and wash it per hand. Hand wash. I wouldn't put a embroidered garment in the machine.
Okay. So I was wondering if you could just demonstrate some of the basic embroidery stitches now, and then sort of give us an idea of when we could use them.
Yes.
So we've just seen how quickly Judit can embroider a tiny little bouquet of flowers like that.
Yeah, the template is called Tussie Mussy. That's a Victorian term for a little bouquet of flowers.
Okay, how cute. So that really took no time at all. Of course, I've sped it up just a tiny little bit, but it really took no time. So that's what we can look forward to, and that's only 3 stitches. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've done.
So first of all, I would say, or I can say that all the templates and all the embroideries of the book are made with only 4 basic stitches and some variations of them. It's split stitch, it's satin stitch, it's French knots, and it's lazy daisies. So you can achieve very complex outcomes with those. Yeah, you can make very opulent flowers or all the insects.
Okay, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And you've just used 3 stitches here. So describe what you did.
So for the stems, I used split stitch. For the leaves and the petals, I used the lazy daisy. And here you can also see how different the outcome is depending on which thread you use. Here I held the thread double, and the little dots are French knots.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you've used a bit of satin stitch here, haven't
exactly,
you?
yes.
Yeah,
Those to fill these small spaces.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's what you would teach in a beginner class?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
step
so
by
it's
step.
pretty easy, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, and then you cut away the stabiliser, and the next step is showing how quickly the stabiliser dissolves.
Yes.
So shall we do that?
We'll do that now. So you'll see.
Okay, so you just would poke this around in water for a little bit, would you?
It disappeared, but it's not washed out yet. So I would rub it gently with my fingertips.
That's pretty amazing.
Isn't it?
It is.
And then be gentle because wet embroidery is fragile. Mm-hmm. Don't wring it.
Okay,
press
just
it.
squeeze or press
Yes.
it. Yeah.
And here we go.
Wow. That's gorgeous. Okay, that's great. So in your book, you use a range of threads, including traditional wool threads, metallic threads, and really beautiful hand-dyed ribbons. So can you show us some examples of how you've used all these materials just to create different effects?
Yeah. So I have a big stack of swatches here to show you.
Yeah,
Let's start with the crazy ones. Those are the most fun for me. Here you can see a collection of insects where different threads are used. As you can see, metallic thread, beads, very thin metallic thread, sock yarn leftovers.
And I have to immediately ask you, are they real species or are some of them made up?
Some are real species. I'm not only collecting vintage textiles, I'm also collecting books about insects.
Okay.
Especially vintage books. I love them. So some are real moths and butterflies, and some are creatures from my fantasy.
I like how you've used long beads here and short ones for the eyes, round ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here you can see, well, that was a failure. That was my first attempt. For example, I made this dragonfly and used this metallic thread held single. And when I washed out the stabilizer, I realized the wings weren't visible as I would have liked it. Mm-hmm. So I started a second one and held the thread. I think it's here, it's double at least. Yeah. And you can see the difference and the outcome. And
that's gorgeous up close, but from a distance that shows a lot more. And again, you've got different beads here in the insect.
To add some depth and interest. And when you imagine you have it on your shoulder,
yes,
this wouldn't be visible from a distance.
Yeah,
so,
but that's gorgeous. That's great. Okay, and some more.
Some more. These are made with vintage tapestry wool. Yeah. I love to buy them in charity shops. You very often get those.
Okay.
And here's some single ply yarns and, well, just all my leftovers I have in my scrap box.
Okay.
But I think the simplest thing you can do is just to use the yarn or the thread you have leftovers from your knitting project. That is a very sophisticated look.
Very elegant, yeah.
Very elegant. And then, here you play with volume. Volume and texture is everything here.
And it's also subtle if you don't want it to stand out too much.
Yeah.
That's really gorgeous. Yeah. Okay. And is that the same design?
It's the same design, and you see how different the outcome is depending on the colors you choose. I mean, that has more contrast. And again, a very few stitches, French knots, lazy daisies, split stitch, the thread held double.
Okay, that really shows up. So it's exactly the same pattern, but total different look.
And you can see the same here with this design. Here you have a very joyful and bright design. That would be very nice for children, I would say, or for who else, and that is a bit more elegant and much calmer, but it's the same template.
Yeah.
And again, only a very few stitches, French knots, also with the thread held double. You see the difference. That is held single, that is held double.
Okay, yes.
Some satin stitch,
and
split
very
stitch.
easy stitches
Yeah,
here.
straight stitches. I mean, that, I was thinking of a children's drawing. I mean, that is a nice idea too. You can stitch your child's drawing, for example.
Exactly. Okay.
And if you're not so much into opulence as we are, and you prefer a more graphic or cleaner look, you can use only one color, for example, here, and have this very clean designs.
Yeah, that's also very striking.
Yeah.
Super striking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here I combined several materials, silk ribbon. This is classic cotton floss. I wouldn't recommend it for big areas of the embroidery because it's inelastic.
Okay.
But for small accents, you can use it. These are from my grandma's craft box.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the little beads there just look stunning.
Yeah. And you see what
beads.
color has or can have a very big effect when you add a little pop of color. This can make things interesting.
Yeah, that's gorgeous design. So there's quite a lot of materials in that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And this one just has to be one of my favourites. The background is so vibrant, and then these colour and this hand-dyed ribbon with its shade, all the colours in it, just makes it so very beautiful.
This is actually eco-printed, so it's even more than hand-dyed.
Okay.
It's made with dried flower petals. And it gives this deepness to the design. And here you can see that you can also use hand-dyed yarn very well if it's not too busy, but
just like variations in colour give you the depth. That looks very natural.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. And this is another very simple but so striking design. So what's that material?
That is a special yarn from Ito. It's a silk yarn that is produced in Japan, and it is produced like a classic cotton embroidery floss. So several strands together, and I split it up and used it in different variations. So I think single, and that here I held it at least 10 strands together.
Yeah.
But you can achieve also very nice results by using one thread, but use it in different, combinations. Yeah. And here I used some precious buttons from my grandmother's button box. The ones you keep all the time but never use it. That's a good opportunity to use them.
I'm so happy they look like little faces for sure.
And this one, the orange one, the extra one.
Yes.
The black sheep.
That's great. Okay, so they're swatches, but of course you've got so many stunning designs. And this design, which I want to hold up, so it's just a very basic jumper and shaped jumper, but on the corner of it is the wheat, which is so beautiful. And this was very, very popular, wasn't it, this design?
It went viral, yes.
So say something about this design here.
Yeah, it was also inspired from my garden because I love ferns. I have a lot of ferns, and I love how they change color in autumn. So I collected this beautiful fern leaf and thought, well, let's try to stitch it. And I made this with also it's hand-dyed yarn, and you can see it really makes it shimmer, you know, the light differences.
It does.
Yeah.
This is similar, isn't it? But it's the same pattern, but you can see the choice of yarn does so much.
Yes. It's a big difference. This is a matte alpaca yarn. I mean, that's also beautiful. You know, that's more like the original leaf was, dried leaf was. And that is like jewelry, I would say.
Yeah, this is sensational. Okay, that's great. And then another one, which I thought was really unique, was this wattle. This is for the Australians, because we have
and
wattle
the Italians,
everywhere.
actually.
Because, of course, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's I think at International Women's Day, you change bouquets of mimosa.
Wattle. Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. So that's totally gorgeous as well.
And that is made of crewel wool, very thin woolen embroidery thread, a very classic one. And you can see it's quite delicate and quite, you know, it's not loud, as you would say.
Yeah, it is very elegant and delicate. And the colour as the background is very beautiful. Okay, and then you can see here that she's got a bird, so she does also do birds. That's really stunning. The bird is gorgeous. And of course that would have to be one of my favourites there, with the hand-dyed ribbon. It's just so stunning.
Yeah. I love the vintage look that it has. It reminds me of, I don't know, when you go to how do you say, Venice, you know, and visit those alt palazzi, you know, like I don't know, this. I wanted to capture this texture and this vibe.
It's utterly gorgeous. Okay, so I think our viewers have seen some really great techniques and received a lot of very helpful advice from you today, and I just find your approach to handcrafting really inspiring, so I'm super glad we've done this interview. Just one last question, and that is, since usually how we spend our time can often reflect our sort of innermost values and what's really important to us, are there any other activities outside of handcrafting that have a real draw on you? And if so, how do they nourish you?
As I've said before, I have a big garden, but I'm also a beekeeper, and I love my bees, really. They are the most precious thing I think I have. And I just love observing them. It calms me down. And I love learning from them. They taught me a lot of important lessons, and they just feed all my senses, you know. I love their humming. It's like meditation.
Yeah.
I love their warmth. I love the scents coming from the hives.
Physical warmth when you get close to the hive.
Yes, it's significant. You can really you can feel the change of temperature. Yeah, and of course I love the things they offer to me, like beeswax and honey, of course.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And how many hives have you actually got?
I have 5. Okay. And some baby hives for next year.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
So every morning you're out there?
Yes.
Wearing your paraphernalia?
Once a week when I check them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but most of the time I just sit next to them in a garden chair. I knit, I embroider a bit, and I enjoy the time being next to them.
And listening to them humming.
Yes.
That sounds so romantic. That's great. Yeah. Okay. And they can teach you a lot, can't they? Because they just work together as a team so brilliantly.
Exactly. They are super organized, and absolutely their determination, devotion is impressive.
Mm-hmm. And their diligence.
Absolutely, yes. And, well, the work with the book reminded me of the life in the hive, actually, because there were so many people working together, supporting me. And in the end, we achieved this big project, but this could only work as a team and together. Yeah, that's true. That's very much true. Okay, well, it has been such a delight to have Judit on Fruity Knitting. So we're so thrilled that we came here, and thank you for giving us your time. Thank you. Let's say goodbye to the audience. Bye-bye. Bye.